Hello everyone and welcome back to the Migration and Upgrade Centre. My name's Stephen Ball and I'm joined here again by our senior migration experts Al Manarino
Hello.
and Mary Kelly.
Hi.
So last time out we looked at the top 5 things to consider when converting your applications, and in this video we're going to be talking about theory and putting it into practice as we migrate an old pre-Unicode application that uses the BDE up to RAD Studio 10.4. Now, like many people converting their applications, the key driver here is to show how to get the application ready to support a 64-bit version of Windows 10. And we're going to be covering kind of the warts and all as we go through this move. So the application we have chosen to look at is the Mast App demo from Delphi 2007. Now, the reason we've chosen this is it provides a number of elements to look at as we go through the migration, but also it's not too big, that makes it easy enough to follow in a webinar format. So let's have a quick look around the Mast App from Delphi 2007. Okay, so here is the Mast App, or the Marine Adventures application, and pretty old school. So let's have a quick look around it. So Al, Mary, what's the first things you notice here?
Well, it looks like we're going to need to check out the icons on Windows 10. I think we're going to see that as we're moving forward, that we're going to see a change in the resolution support in Windows 10 due to high DPI. This is going to, I'm imagining, make the icons look a little bit smaller on most machines.
Yeah, I'm also thinking we might need to check out what's behind the help button here. Microsoft changed the help system a number of years ago, so that could be an external dependency and something that we might need to modify. So let's kind of quick, I'm just going to search for help file here. Yeah, we can see here this is a HLP file. So that'll definitely need updating.
And Stephen, as you mentioned earlier, this application is a non-Unicode English-only application. So I believe I recall seeing about 91 strings used in this application. So the good news is, in many cases, legacy applications like this may just migrate from non-Unicode to a Unicode version of Delphi with little or no changes at all. So we'll see what happens as we get into the migration, if we need any Unicode changes at all. Okay,
great. I'm just going to have a quick look at a couple of the other areas in here. So the browser is opening this form here. BR customer order parts. Yeah, we can definitely improve the size of that and maybe a bit of anchoring and stuff in here to kind of clean that up. In fact, let's just go and run this, and probably the quickest way to look through the application is actually to run it here, isn't it? So
here's an example looking at the scroll bars. Another nice place where we can add some UI modernization to make it look more new and more modern.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that looks like we're going to have another UI update. We can get some kind of quick usability ones there with the calendar controls with our Win10 calendar views in 10.4.
Agreed. Let's look at the code behind the date picker here quickly. So that was on this form here. And let's go and have a look at the date picker. Okay, yeah, there seems to be quite a few string to date conversions going on here, where we haven't had kind of a nice control to work with in the past. So that again seems to be setting just some properties on the form, so that's going to be really easy to retrospectively, update and put back in. Okay, so let's have a look further around. We've obviously got data being used quite a bit. Let's have a quick look, see what's on the data module here.
Okay, interesting. So on that bottom, that bottom right hand is there's a T data component. I'm also seeing some T tables and some T queries. So this is the good old BDE, the Borland Database Engine.
Okay, so the database is pointing at the DB demos, which from memory was probably Paradox tables in 2007.
Yeah, I suspect if you opened up the BDE administrator, you would see that it's the Paradox table pointing at the DB demos. So you are correct.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's going to fail our 64-bit requirement then, and getting it onto Windows 10. That'll definitely need modernization.
And I've actually been using the InterBase DataPump recently to update a lot of our customers from Paradox to InterBase. So that seems like it would be a really sensible path, especially with the runtime-free IB Lite version.
Wonderful, Mary and Stephen. So up to this point, I agree with everything we've been saying on how to migrate off of this Delphi 2007 application to the current Delphi 10.4.
Okay, so I think we're getting a bit of a plan together. I think first things, let's get this code opening in 10.4 without reporting any component errors as we open through the forms. And then let's have a look at getting the Unicode analysis done. The database side of things, we've identified that we need to move up. So let's get that change done straight off the bat. And we know it's all automated with the refine. So let's look at getting that done straight up to FireDAC to start.
So yes, I'll be able to cover that, and we'll be able to show how easy it is to migrate off of the BDE to FireDAC using the included refine utility.
Okay, so if we need to for the initial test, then obviously we can point to the Paradox ODBC driver for initial testing of the database access before we migrate over to InterBase. But I think definitely worth getting it moved over to InterBase, the 64-bit version, so we can fulfill that requirement.
Yeah, and I can pick that up.
Awesome, thanks, Mary. Okay, I'll pick up the help files. I've done some work with that recently, and that just leaves the UI modernization elements that we've picked up along the way.
And I know a good site for getting a lot of those icons at multiple resolutions so that we can swap them in for the modern T-Speed button, which then supports image lists, and I can also sort out the calendar control.
Okay, awesome. Right, great. I think we have a plan. So let's get this code checked in, and then Al, let's fire it over to you.
Thank you. Since Stephen, Mary, and myself will be working together on this code migration from different locations, it's a great idea to upload the project code to a version control system. Delphi has built-in integration with 3 of the most popular version control systems: Git, Mercurial, and Subversion. For our project, we chose to use Git. So here we see our Delphi 2007 Mast App project uploaded to GitHub at this URL. So now using GitHub, we will be able to collaborate and look back at previous versions of our work, and Git will keep track of all of our changes to the code. To get the GitHub project onto our local disk, using the Delphi IDE, we can use File, Open from Version Control. We will select Git, and for the source, we will select our GitHub location, and for destination, we will select an empty folder. So I'll use my Documents folder and a folder called Delphi 2007 Projects. So now when I click OK, we see that the GitHub project gets cloned to our local drive. I will select the project to open, which is our Mast App Delphi project. And here we now see that our Mast App project has been cloned onto our local disk under GitHub version control. So that's great. And now we see the Mast App project in our Delphi 10.4 IDE. So now any changes we make to this code will be logged by Git. So for example, if I select the main.pass, we now have a menu item called Git that allows us to commit and or revert any changes. So all of this is great. Now that we have the Mast App project cloned from GitHub on our local disk, let's open the Mast App project in Delphi 10.4 Sydney and see what happens. The first error we get is error reading from mass data. Class TDatabase not found. So let's click cancel. And the next error again is also class TDatabase not found. We recall that this component, TDatabase, comes from our data module. This component, TDatabase, is from the BDE, the Borland Database Engine. So let's click cancel again. At least we get to have the project open and we can see our main form like this. This MAST app application uses the BDE for data access to local paradox tables. Now with Delphi 10.4, the BDE is not installed by default, but for backwards compatibility, Delphi 10.4 Sydney still includes the BDE as a separate installation. To get the BDE installer for Delphi 10.4 Sydney, you can log into your registered product portal page at my.embarcadero.com using your Embarcadero Developer Network username and password to log in, and then click the Cloud Download icon on the left panel and search for the BDE for RAD Studio 10.4 and download the installer. And run the BDE installer. This will install the BDE runtime units into your Delphi 10.4 IDE. Next, we also want to see and use the BDE design time components like the missing TDatabase component in our Delphi 10.4 IDE. So we also need to install the BDE design time package for the BDE components. To do this, from the Delphi 10.4 IDE, we select Component, Install Packages, click Add, and we browse to the bin folder of our 10.4 IDE installation, and we search for and we select the package called DCL BDE 270, and we click Open. Now when we look at the install design packages, we now see we have the Embarcadero BDE DB components listed as one of the install design packages. And if we click the Components button, we see the BDE installed components, including our TDatabase component. So now let's try and reopen the MAST app project and see if we resolved our missing class TDatabase not found error. But now we get a new error. Network initialization failed, permission denied, file C, pdoxusers.net, directory C:. So what does this error mean, and how do we resolve this error? This error comes from needing to set the path for the netdir for paradox from the BDE. To resolve this error, let's first create a new folder. Let's call it C:BDE share, and this will be the location of the application's network control file from the error message, the pdoxusers.net file. Next, to set the path for the network directory, we run the BDE administration utility, and we click on Configuration, Drivers, Native, and Paradox, and we need to set the netdir property to the BDE share folder we just created. And we browse to our C:BDE share folder and click OK. So now our netdir for our paradox native driver is set to our C:BDE share folder. And now we can click Object, Apply, save all edits to Paradox. All BDE applications must be restarted for changes to take effect. That's fine. And we can say Object, Exit. This should now resolve our network initialization failed error we were getting. Let's now restart our Delphi 10.4 Sydney IDE and open the MAST app project and see if we resolved all of our open errors. Click on the MAST app project. So now we see our Delphi 2007 MAST app open in Delphi 10.4 with no open errors. So all of this is great so far. Now that we can get our Delphi 2007 project to open in Delphi 10.4 without any open errors, let's try and build a project and see if we get any build errors. From the project manager, I'll select my MAST app, right-click, and select build. So for the build, we see we have 2 warnings and 2 errors. The first error we see is undeclared identifier short date format. This is a common error you will get upgrading from older Delphi versions to the new Delphi versions. In the older Delphi versions, before XC3, this variables declaration was in the system.sysutils unit, but starting with Delphi XC3, those variables were moved into the T format settings record. The easy fix for this error is to replace short date format with format settings.short date format, since format settings is a global variable of the T format settings type declared in sysutils, which have these variables. So if we now select format settings, right click, find declaration, we see that T format settings comes from the system.sysutils unit. So now we can make the same change to these next 3 short date format variables. So instead of calling short date format, we will call format settings short date format. So that should resolve any undeclared identifier error with short date format. So now let's try another project build and see if we get any build errors. So now, as we see, we have 0 build errors, so that is great. Let's now look again at the data module for this application. As we discussed earlier, this Delphi 2007 MAST app application is an order entry system that uses the Borland database engine, BDE, for data access to paradox tables. So this application interacts with the orders table, the customer table, the vendors table, and the parts table. As we discussed, the BDE has been deprecated for the last 20 years, so we really need to migrate off of the BDE to a newer, more performant supported data access layer that supports Windows 10 64-bit and modern security standards. Looking at the Data Explorer tab, we see we have DB Express and FireDAC as data access layers. Since the BDE is deprecated, and Embarcadero advises not to use the BDE for any new projects, since the BDE is no longer supported, and the BDE was never tested or certified to run on the newer operating systems like Windows 10 64-bit, and the BDE will not support Unicode, so Embarcadero's advice is to move off of the BDE to a newer, more performant data access component that is certified and supported by Embarcadero. Today, our newest and most performant universal data access components are called FireDAC. The good news is Delphi now includes a utility called Refind that will automatically migrate both your Delphi code and forms from the BDE to FireDAC. So this means you do not need to spend any time or effort to migrate off of the BDE to FireDAC. So now let's take a look at how to migrate our Delphi 2007 BDE application to a Delphi 10.4 application using FireDAC for the data access layer. As we read in the doc wiki for Delphi 10.4 Sydney, there is a section called Migrating BDE Applications to FireDAC, and the BDE application migration topic explains how to run the RAD Studio tool called Refind in order to replace the BDE terms with their FireDAC counterparts. The Refind tool is located in your RAD Studio bin directory. The Refind command line tool is based on regular expressions that can process arbitrary text files for replacing occurrences of certain text patterns, like, for example, references to units in uses clauses and types of components in class declarations from the BDE to FireDAC. So the refine tool can take as a parameter the location of the rules file that tells the refine tool how to replace the different BDE references to FireDAC. And the actual migration of Delphi source code and forms is just a matter of invoking the refine tool and passing the regular expression file. In this case, it'll be the FireDAC migrate BDE text file that will modify all of our .pas files and all of our DFM files. Looking at the regular expression file we will use for our BDE to FireDAC migration, called FireDAC migrate BDE.txt, and this file is included in your Delphi installation, we see how it will search for and replace migrate BDE syntax to the FireDAC equivalent. So for example, a BDE TDatabase will get migrated to a T FireDAC connection. A BDE table will get migrated to a T FireDAC table, and a BDE query will get migrated to a FireDAC FD query, plus all the other BDE terms will get migrated to their FireDAC equivalents. So now let's look at doing the actual migration. I want to keep the original source code for the BDE version of the Delphi 2007 MAST app application. So the first thing I did is I created a new folder called FireDAC_MAST app. So this folder will contain the FireDAC version of the MAST app application. Next, I'll copy all the files from my Delphi 2007 MAST app BDE application folder to my new FireDAC MAST app folder. So here we see all 71 files were copied. So here I am in command line in my FireDAC_MAST app folder, and from here I can run the refine utility on the MAST app PAS files and DFM files using the search and replacement of Perl regular expression text patterns in the FireDAC_migrate_BDE.txt file, and this will apply the refined specific migration rules to our PAS and DFM files. So let's execute the refine command now. We see it's doing its processing, and it modified all the needed PAS and DFM files to convert our BDE application to FireDAC. So that is how quick it can do it. So now let's open up our newly created MAST app FireDAC version of our application, and we'll look at the data module and see what it looks like. So here we see our Delphi 2007 BDE application migrated from the BDE to use FireDAC components. For example, what used to be our BDE TDatabase component is now a T FireDAC connection component. What used to be a BDE table component is now a FireDAC FD table component. And what used to be a BDE query component is now a FireDAC FD query component. So that's how easy it is to migrate off of the BDE to use FireDAC by just running the refine utility. So all of this is great. Now, since we are still under Git version control, let me commit these changes to our Git repository. So selecting the MAST app exe, right click, selecting Git. Let me select commit from the repository root. So here we see all the files we have modified in our MAST app project. Let me first add a comment. Migrated the BDE to FireDAC, and now let me commit these changes. So that's done. So now our GitHub repository has been modified without changes.
So I went ahead and downloaded the MAST app application from GitHub after I got the notification that it had been moved from the BDE to FireDAC. So now I can go into my data module, and that should open up and see that I have my FireDAC components that have now replaced the BDE components. So now we could always use FireDAC to connect to our Paradox database through ODBC, and I could keep the Paradox tables when I'm building or upgrading the application. But let's say you want to get away from Paradox or DBase or any of the other older databases and make the move to some SQL database. In this case specifically, I am going to switch to the InterBase database. Now, InterBase is a highly scalable, powerful, embeddable, and encryptable database that works across several different platforms, including iOS and Android. Something only a few databases out there do while running natively on these platforms. It's extremely lightweight and has a tiny footprint, so you can imagine how quick it is by not bogging down your system. It also has a near zero administration, so you can deploy it and you don't need a DBA to consistently maintain it. As far as moving our application from Paradox to InterBase, there's this nifty little tool here called the InterBase DataPump. It's from a group called Clever Components, and it's going to take any ADO, BDE, or InterBase data source and actually migrate it to our targeted InterBase databases. So it's a free download, it's freeware, and we can take a look here, see the steps, and then download from there. So once you have the InterBase DataPump open, you're going to go ahead and select the database and then also set up all of your properties. So in this case, we're using the BDE and we're using the DB demos. It automatically popped up on my machine, but in the event that you have other data sources from the BDE, you can go through and click them. You have your username and password, which typically are already inserted anyway. You'll test the connection and make sure that it's passed. Then you can go through and set up any of the properties specifically, so relating to the pump. Maybe you need to disable any of your triggers. Maybe you need to empty out the destination tables before the pumps, or even updating generators. You can also go through the string field properties and building the relationships, typically case-insensitive fields and table comparisons. Now we're going to go through and choose our destination database properties. Now, in some cases, if you've already created the InterBase database before this, then you can just toggle through and specifically choose where that database is. If you don't have a database already created for it, you can go into IB console, click on the database, either right-click on this database and create the database, or you can click up at the top of the menu, create database, go ahead and create the database with the title that you want. In this case, I'll be using DB demos. You can go through with the options such as changing the size of the page, or also adding in something like embedded user authentication for additional security purposes. You can choose to save the password or even use the alias for database connections. Now we can choose our dbdemos.ib file. We can go ahead and test that connection, and it has passed. Now we're going to want to build out a SQL script for the source so that as we're moving from Paradox to InterBase, it creates the schema script that we just install then into InterBase. So we're going to go ahead and build our SQL script. It's going to save the script to some file, in this case the convertbde.sql. It will rewrite over this additional text file that I already had from another migration. It'll go through and match up with the dialect, any specific character default sets that you may set. And it'll also create the generators for auto-incremented fields. You can choose to add them in manually, so you can add and go through any of the tables that you have and specifically pull in those fields. Or you can also just let InterBase DataPump create those generators for you. So all of these fields more or less match up as a one-to-one with what InterBase is looking for between the migration from the BDE to InterBase. So we can go ahead and click Start, all fine, and it opens up this converted BDE script. And as you can see, it really just creates the schema for the entire script. So now we can go into our IB console, into the interactive SQL, and we'll be able to add this query, load the entire script, and run the script from there, so that when we have our database created, we'll be able to see that all of the schema has now matched up, and we've successfully moved the schema from our FireDAC database to our InterBase database. There's still no data yet, as we haven't actually used the DataPump portion, but at least now we've completed half of our database migration. From there, we can click Close and go into the order. Now you can grab the definitions, and then from there it gives you these nice 3 steps where you can then build the relationships. So you can either choose to do this manually, or you can build the relations and it will specifically look at each of these and make sure that as close to matching between the InterBase and FireDAC tables as there can be in terms of data types. You can also do the exact same thing using the generators. And moving on to step 3 with the DataPump, I'll go ahead and click Start. I'm going to get this message about the destination database is in forced writes mode. This is just because my IB server is currently set to that. So it's going to make the pump a little bit slower. I can go ahead and open up my InterBase database IB console. In the process of that, I can go ahead and log into my database, and it should be just about done by now. So I'm going to go ahead and see if my data was migrated, and it looks like all of my data for all of my tables, let's check up a couple more, has actually been migrated over. So now I can go back into RAD Studio or my Delphi application, and I can actually build the connection instead of with my FireDAC database, connect it to my InterBase database. So I can go into my driver ID, change that up, change the location from a demo app to, let's see, migrations here, my DB demos, using my username and password. I can test the connection. OK, I can click OK. All right, let's go ahead and run our application. And we'll see here, no runtime errors for our database. So FireDAC said, yes, I can connect to InterBase. Let's go ahead and click through parts. And we can see that we're now pulling data directly from the InterBase database rather than the FireDAC tables that we were before. We've successfully run the application as a 32-bit, and we've decided that we also want to migrate to 64-bit as well. So our first step is to expand out our target platforms and double-click on the Windows target platform. Now, because the 32-bit application also resides in the project folder, we're going to have to go back into our project options and recreate or create a new path for our 64-bit application. Now I currently have the output directory and the unit output directory set to the folders that I want, in this case Win64 and debug. If I save that, I can run the application in 64-bit, and we can now see that the application is loaded and is now running in 64-bit. We can then go into the FireDAC Mast app, and we can see that the Win64 folder's been created, and our application along with all the DCUs have been added to that folder.
Okay then, let's have a look at the help. So the help section here in the app We click on it, it opens up the help, and this goes directly to the contents. We can browse through, there's links and bits in there. That all seems to be working. We've got contents, which just has the general list page here. So let's go and have a look at the actual help file, or let's search for the help file within the document, in the code here. So let's just go and search for help file. And we can see the help file is set up as the application starts running here, just after the initialize, before the main forms are created up. So the forms are then referencing to the application help file rather than having to specify it on the form level. And here just using the HLP file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a copy of that, which I've already done actually, and I've copied it over here to my Windows 10 VM. So here we can see we're running Windows 10. Now if I try to run the old help on Windows 10, it's going to open up a web browser and it's going to tell us something along the lines of help's not supported, giving us an error message. So we need to get this sorted. What we can do, however, we can quickly convert this to the new CHM format. So I've had a quick look around. Help NDoc is just one of many products out there. They do a personal edition, which the licensing here allows for evaluation purposes, but not for commercial use. So we're just going to evaluate that, make sure it's working, and then if we need it, then €99 without having to worry about any of the source or anything else for the help, we can get it converted pretty quickly. So let's just go into NDoc here and create a new project and create an empty project. And I'm going to import in the help file from our desktop. So that's pretty quick and easy. We can see that we've then got all the contents showing here. So one thing I do know from previous use of this kind of thing is we just need to just check the format of the paragraphs here. It used to be kind of points, but we need to make sure it's at least single spacing. And the reason for that is just with different resolutions on Windows 10, it's much better to have a specific line spacing rather than traditional font size. Okay, so I'm just going to go through and do those on each of those pages, and then we'll come back to the project. Okay, so I've been through and formatted the paragraphs now. Let's go ahead and generate the help file, and we need to generate a CHM version. And there we are. And if we go and open up the file location here, we can see we now have a new help file generated. And let's open that up and just check that. That looks good. We can see we've got a nice table of contents. The stuff's all readable, and it navigates through. That's done a great job of getting that converted. Okay, so we now have a help file. Whilst the other guys are working on the other parts of the program, I've been working in parallel. Just going to take my help file and I'm going to make sure I can get it to run. Just like any external or third-party component, first thing to do is test it, make sure we can get it working. So let's go ahead into RAD Studio now. We're going to create a new VCL Forms application. Now if we just quickly skip back to the master app demo here. There we are, main form. The help here is calling help command. So let's just go and copy that across and put a button down. Now help contents here is declared. That's great. So we've got, that's pointing at 3, which seems to be the same on back here as well. Okay, good. The other thing we need to just check is the help file, where the help file is getting set. So if we go search help file, we can see that's getting set just before the application starts here in the main source. Okay, so let's just go ahead and I'm going to copy that and jump back to our VM and to our project. And if we select the project, press Ctrl V, we can go back to the source here. Let's just go set the help file. Now the help file is changed to CHM. Now as I build this application for the first time, it's not going to be pointing at the folder, or the source code isn't going to be in the help file is not going to be in the folder. So let's just go ahead and save all of this, and we'll just make a temporary folder here called help test. And call it help test app. And I'm just going to go hit compile. Now I'm going to use debugging because it's simple if we have any issues. So let's just go ahead and we can show this in Explorer. Here's the Win32 debug. There's the test application. Now the application is expecting the help file to be in that directory. So I'm going to take the application file for the help file, sorry, and put that in here. That's master app.chm. So master app.chm. So let's go ahead and run now, and we should hopefully. Okay, well we've hit an error. So this is one of the key things that Al mentioned about in his top 5 things, is checking for runtime errors. We made a change. Does it work? Well, we got it. We know the help file works. We just opened it and explored it. But the unable to find a table of contents is actually pretty simple to solve. We need to stay just here, and we need to add into the uses for the application that uses HTML help viewer. Because the CHM format is basically a HTML format. So let's go ahead and run. And now the app's working. Great. We've got a help coming up. And the help works directly from here. Great. So tested. We've got it working. We know that we need to update this one line of code, put the new help file in place, and we should then be ready just to check to make sure the rest of the help context is working and in place as it was before.
We've gotten to the point in our migration process where we're wanting to update the UI and give it a more modern look and feel, such as adding Windows 10 styling, or even being able to take advantage of new Windows 10 features such as high DPI on multiple monitors. With Windows 10 UIs, they need to be able to scale according to the DPI of the target monitor. And when you have images or other graphical elements that aren't scaled properly, they can look blurry, too small, or even too large in some cases. So during our initial planning meetup, we discussed some of the things that it looked like right off the bat we could change. So the first thing that we're going to change is the icons on these T-speed buttons. They look a little bit outdated, and we want to give them a more modern look and feel. Now, if I go ahead and I run this application, we can see right off the bat that there's definitely an issue with the sizing of the images and other graphical elements within the application. I'm running a machine that happens to have 2880 by 1800 for my screen resolution, so the images that we have here are quite small. So it's almost impossible to tell what the little wrenches are here under parts if I wasn't aware of what they were above. So that's going to be the first thing that we go through and change. With RAD Studio 10.4 Sydney, you're able to include some scaling high DPI multi-resolution images in your VCL applications. And you do this by using 2 specific components, the T image collection component and the T virtual image list. When paired together, you're able to load multiple resolutions of the exact same image into the image collection here. And then the image list holds the set of images from the image source itself. The image list holds a set of images that are then sourced from this image collection and then presents them at a specific size, say 16 by 16 or 48 by 48. Now the images are then smoothly resized and scaled, and the image list's actual presentation resolution is then changed based on the DPI of the target machines. So there's this great website called Android Asset Studio that is, as listed, a collection of tools that easily generate assets such as launcher icons. In this case, we're going to look at the launcher icons. Now, one of the cool parts about this is that it'll take an image, it'll take clip art or even text, and it will actually create them at different screen resolutions. So for instance, 16 by 16, maybe 48 by 48, 72 by 72, and it'll actually create them so that you can download them as the pre-packaged resolution, so that when you want to add them to projects, you don't have to worry about how an image is going to look, if it's going to be blurry versus kind of clean and crisp. Moving back into our image collection list, I'm going to go ahead and show the image collector editor. So I can just go here and click on add, and I can go through each of these, and you'll see here that the icons show up under selected images as different resolution sizes. So as I add in more, you can see they're matching up with the name for each of these icons. So I've got a 72 by 72, 48. I'll go ahead and just add in the rest of these real quick. Now that we've added in all of our icons, you can see here that we have as small as 48 by 48 all the way up to 192. Now, if I go ahead and click OK, then for close specifically, since that's the exit, I'm going to go ahead and set the virtual image list to the image collector 1. I can go ahead and click on the image list editor, and I can choose to add from the image collection, specifically the icon exit. Once I add that icon exit, it's got multiple different sizes here as the selected image. I can click OK to that, and then I can go up here to my speed button close, and down under images I can choose that virtual image list and whatever the icon specifically is listed at as the image list. Now when I go ahead and run the application, we can then see that the icon was changed. It no longer looks as small as the other icons that I have listed under those T-speed buttons, and it's been scaled properly. So if I have a larger screen resolution, it'll scale properly to that. Now I'll go ahead and do the same thing with the rest of the buttons. So if I right click, I already went ahead and added all of the 5 icons that I will be replacing. They all have the same pixel size, so no variation there. You can go ahead and click OK. Now going into the virtual image list, I can go ahead and add the rest of them. So I can say select all, OK, and can click OK again. And now through each of the parts, I can actually go through to the images. I'll get rid of my messages down here. I can go through to the images, add the virtual image list, and choose for each one of them. So for new order, we'll choose new order. For browse, we'll choose the search. And then for parts, we can use list. So we've now been able to update each of the icons. So if we go ahead and run the application again, then we can see that the icons themselves are very crisp and clean, and they also are scaled properly to the size for the rest of the application. Now, if we move into Browse, there was one other section that we really wanted to work on, which was defining of the calendar range. So this calendar looks quite old and outdated. So we're going to go ahead and replace it with the T calendar view that we recently added to Delphi. So we'll go ahead and close out and open up our pickdate.pass file. So we're going to expand out the form a little bit so that we can see a side-by-side comparison of the calendar view with the current calendar that we have listed out here. So from this calendar, as we can see, it seems like it's a little bit more outdated, while the T calendar view was actually designed for Windows 10. So it gives it a more modernized look, like you would expect from a Windows 10 application. So we're just now going to remove the components from the older calendar set, and we then will also change a little bit of the code in the back end because a few of the procedures and components will no longer be there. We'll just have to make a few changes there. So the cancel still stays. The next month, that's actually pre-built into the Win10 T calendar view, and we can get rid of the previous as it's also located there, and the title label as well. Now we will just move our buttons down a little bit, and we can then add and resize our T calendar view as well as the form itself. I'll reposition those buttons. We can give it a little bit of spacing up at the top, bring our buttons a little bit more centered there. Now all we have to do is go into our code, and you'll see here that there were a few changes. If we look at the procedures specifically, we no longer have the previous and next month or the calendar change. So we can go ahead and just, I'm going to comment these out so that I can talk with the team about what we want to do next with those, whether we want to keep them in as part of a demo code or change it. So the set date, we're going to change this to calendar view 1, and T calendar view 1 does not have a property called calendar date, but it does have a property called date. We can make the same change here. Calendar view 1, switch that as well to date. We no longer have this procedure, next button, or the change procedure. So I'm just going to go ahead, right click and surround those. And now we should be able to go and build our application. And we now have updated our MassApp application with new icons as well as the Windows 10 calendar.
Okay, so I think we're reaching the end now. But thought it'd be good to have a quick look through the final product and have a look at the differences between the two. So I know, Mary, you've got them on your machine there. So do you want to pull them up and we can have a quick look at the before and the after, so to speak?
Yeah, so this is our new and updated version. And then also got our older version.
Yeah, so the size and the icons looking a lot better.
Yeah, you can definitely see the resolution actually kind of fits with these, so they're, instead of being so tiny.
And if you kind of jump in and out of a couple of the forms there, and
jump on into new orders, for instance. So you can see here the resolution and kind of sizing of some of the icons as well.
Cool. And was it on the browse that we had the calendar control update done?
Yeah, so on the browse, I'll go ahead and I'll show what it looked like before. This is the old version for the calendar update. So then I went ahead and made a few changes there. Whoops. Back into the browse and then define the query. I'll move those over so we can see them side by side. You can see here, I just went ahead and kind of switched around the component, just dropped in the calendar view.
So yeah, if you kind of click around on the date at the top there, the year and the month and stuff.
Yeah, you can even click here and go
into
the decades this way. I want to go back that far. It's a lot of clicks. Yeah, so I could choose, March 1st to get there, March 1st, 1993. All I have to do is just go up a little bit, March and the 1st, for instance, and it still works exactly the same. You can set the dates at the end. It's a lot easier to get to a further date with our new calendar view rather than going through and clicking that button 100 times to go a decade back.
Yeah, and just kind of nicer usability on it. And obviously, one of the other things that we could have done to go even further then is to actually refactor that form probably out of the application completely with the calendar drop-down components and bits. So, pretty cool. Yeah. And the help's all working and everything else like that, which it wasn't before. So, okay, great.
Yeah,
so cool. So, final thoughts in terms of the process, Al?
Well, for me, going through this process, we realize it's really easy to migrate a legacy Delphi 2007, non-Unicode English only application to the current Delphi 10.4. And we saw, getting off of the BDE to a new supported data access layer like FireDAC was pretty easy, running that refined utility. And I'm also going to point out, in this Delphi 2007 non-Unicode English only application, there were 91 string types. So that kind of answers the question. It's a misconception that just because you have 100 strings or 1,000 strings or 1,000,000 strings in your application does not mean you have to make any Unicode changes. It really depends on how you're using the strings in charge in your application. And as we saw in this migration, from our 91 strings, we did not need to make any Unicode changes to migrate a Delphi 2007 app to Delphi 10.4. So all of that was great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Very, very smooth. And, the external dependencies we've had, we've been able to work through pretty easily. With the refine tools and with the help conversion, even though we didn't have the original help documentation file that was put together, just like the output. So, Mary, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, really, we saw how easy it was to be able to take older kind of styled looking images and actually just kind of very easily move them and have multiple resolutions so that as screen scale, if you've got 4K, if you've got an older machine, you're really going to get a newer look and feel, and you're going to be able to see, that the application's been updated and that it just looks a lot better.
In fact, now we've got to the end. Are you able to change your Windows resolution there? We can maybe show it a bit more extreme. I don't know if it's...
Yeah, let me go ahead and just change that resolution. I go ahead...
An application that's running on Windows 10 on a supported certified operating system. In addition to 32-bit application we now have a 64-bit version of the same application.
Yeah, it makes a big difference just having that image list resize and pick out the correct image automatically. And it literally has taken us, 10 minutes to kind of put those icons in, and it really does make a huge difference in time. So.
Yeah, it really is. I think the thing that really took, the longest amount of time for me was just going through and actually in the Android Asset Studio and figuring out all of the customizations that I wanted to work through. That was probably the longest amount of time that I took to actually get this up and going.
Yeah, and that's a job for the graphic designer most of the time. So, okay, pretty cool. Okay, good. So I think there we are. If you are looking at getting your application migrated and move through, hopefully you'll find this a useful example to work through. And you can see it's not too scary. If you do get stuck along the way, then obviously there's our Embarcadero professional services on hand to be able to help you and work with you to help with your migration if you need it. So please feel free to reach out to one of our sales team to talk about what we can do to help you along the way if you're worried about making that move. But I think on the whole, the big thing here, we haven't even kind of touched really at adding additional VCL styles into the application and being able to update the additional kind of styles and look and feel, and there's even more that you can do that's very quick and easy to do. But it is just so much quicker and easier and cheaper to be able to migrate your old code up and to take advantage of Windows 10 than it is to kind of worry about what you're going to do, and the risk of kind of losing customers or spending out a lot of money on redeveloping into something else. It's time now just to get on and get yourself converted and get moved up. So on you go.
Excellent.
So happy coding, everyone, and we'll look forward to hearing from you and seeing you again soon.